Yeah.
Anyway, it is 5:30 and it's an introductory ordinance 19113 considering planning, an ordinance to amend the code of the city of Binghamton, chapter 410, zoning to modernize zoning regulations and streamline the planning approval process. And roll call, Mr. Clerk, please.
Right. Chairman Mazza.
Present.
Committee member Papstrap.
Present.
And committee member Taylor.
Present.
And Councilman Livingston is also in attendance.
Present for some reason.
Well, that's good. That's not bad. And hello, Tito. How are you, sir?
Good, how are you?
Good. Where are we going with this? You want to start us off?
Sure. I'm just here to respond to any questions that council has that arose from the last meeting where you heard the concerns of certain stakeholders.
So let's start with the obvious one, which is C6. So I know that's going to PC, but I think what we referred to PC was different in terms of the area of the C6 zoning than I think that community members asked for. And I don't know how other council members feel about it.
The Charlie Ackerman had suggested that I think the do you have that? Do you have what he said about one side of Chestnut, I believe, and then if you take it out too far over towards North Street, you may invite more commercial than you want. I think so.
What he and I think everyone else agreed to was Chestnut to front and Ayers to north. That's what I remember. And I think what we have right now is different. It leaves off Chestnut, for example.
You mean in the current C6?
That's correct.
Yeah, so when it goes, I should say when it goes to PC, Tito will take that rec with him, and they should come down to PC and talk about it.
Right, so let's just make sure we have that reflected.
Yes.
The boundary for the urban village, there's an existing one for the overlay, but that can be changed as part of the C6 legislation. Right now it goes all the way to the railroad on the north, and then it goes to what I believe is Leroy. It includes the southern parcel on Leroy, and it goes west to St. John and east to about Florence.
Is Ayers in there?
No, Ayers is not in there.
No.
Nor is Chestnut.
And when we drafted the legislation, we figured that we would use the existing boundary since that had already been through the process. There had been public input, council had sorted that out. And so we thought we'd keep the existing boundary and just fix the regulations so that they're actually enforceable.
Can I ask you, so this is for more than 6 bedrooms?
So we're talking about two different pieces of legislation. We have a full rewrite of the zoning ordinance that actually skipped over all the urban village stuff. And then the C6 legislation that Danny put forward is to take the existing urban village overlay, make the regulations in that overlay district enforceable, and convert the overlay district from an overlay to an actual formal zoning district.
Now, what that does, from a couple of the landlords that I talked to, it legalizes the student housing in that area.
It would do that.
Because you're not dealing with a functional family law.
Right.
But the rest of the city would become, I mean, it would not help the rest of the city in the sense, if you wanted to have student housing on the south side or east side or whatever, it would still be that gray area.
If you wanted to have student housing in a residential zoning district, that would technically not be allowed. You can have it currently, and if this were adopted, you can have it in non-residential zoning districts.
But it does seem that with changing the way the C6 works, we could conceivably rezone parts of the city as C6, but right now, you can't just like drop it on an overlay district on a different part of the city.
I understand anything. But what it does, right now it's a it's a gray area about the functional family, and it's a complaint-driven kind of thing. It's been that way for decades. By doing this, you're kind of making the rest of the student housing illegal in the different parts of the city.
It already is illegal.
But it's gonna shed a new light on it by doing this, don't you think?
I think that the C6 legislation, combined with the change to the definition of family, functional family in the current zoning legislation, would make it easier to enforce non-functional families living in residential.
Are they gonna be grandfathered, the ones that are in now, or is it?
Only if they're legal.
Right, how are we gonna know that? How are we gonna know if they're legal or not? I mean, without doing inspections?
If there is a group, let's say there's a rooming house on Ayers, that we're not a functional family, there are 10 people living in the house that are not related, that's currently not legal, and creating a C6 or passing the new zoning legislation would not make that legal.
Unless it was, because it wasn't converted,
Because the alterations were illegal to begin with.
there was no permit for the conversion and no permit.
Well, the functional family is about the tenancy. It's not necessarily about the structure of the building. So there's no way to grandfather an illegal functional non-family group.
All right, let's see, so what happens if you have that on Ayers and then Ayers becomes part of the C6, and that you say that that's gonna be illegal, so what happens to that?
No, if Ayers were included in the C6, it would no longer be a residential zoning district, so people who aren't related can live together.
Okay.
But that says nothing about the structure of the house, whether bedrooms are added, converted illegally, and so on.
So on that aspect, what happens? If it's been converted illegally and you have a bedroom that used to be a dining room or an attic that's really not properly done without a fire escape or something, let's say, how are we gonna know that these things are,
I can answer.
They would have to show a permit.
I can answer that.
So if the zoning officer or an enforcement officer goes into a property and what he or she sees is not what we have on record, and there's no permits or anything showing that it was changed from what we had on record legally, then they can be cited and they would have to either legalize it or
Take it back.
right.
So what it was.
Make it.
Yeah.
what are you
And-
saying if code enforcer, but, I mean, it may be 10 years down the road and the code enforcer won't be going into one of these places, or do you
Well, we
plan to
heard-
see it?
I still run the Boone County Landlord Association. I work with all the West Side landlords. We created this with the West Side in mind for the C6, and it's, right now it's all illegal. So we have to go step by step in order to be able to see if something needs variances. Right now, anything in anywhere that has student housing is illegal unless it's in a commercial place. So making the C6, which is a commercial residential, then that just means that that's not illegal. Once we can say, okay, it's not illegal to have now this doesn't have to abide by the functioning family, then we can start looking into the small groups where it's in part of my district and part of Conrad's district. It's very easy to go through and look and check for variances. And then we can start going on, and they will have to go back to, like, say you have like a 4-bedroom that was illegally converted into 7 bedrooms. They have to go through and get the variances, and if it shows that it's not safe, they'll have to take it back down to the 4 bedrooms.
Tina, will you take those updated geographic locations that we talked about at the beginning of the meeting to the planning commission on our behalf when they bring this up again next week? In 2
Or the
weeks?
new, like,
Yes,
boundaries.
Ayers,
Yeah, there's,
Ayers to north and
well,
front to Chestnut.
we have the, Ayers to Maine, and then Chestnut to Oak, and then the whole, all north of Maine area from front to, I think you said.
North.
North. No, no, we have, because we have Edward Street on there as well.
The one thing that I'll add, and Tito's the expert on this particular piece of legislation. Most of you guys may not be aware that New York State just passed such an amendment to Section 302A of real property law that affects multiple dwellings. And what they essentially said is that not only do you not have to pay rent as a tenant, but it is no landlord can proceed in a non-payment proceeding if there is not a certificate of occupancy. So I think one of the hopes with the large-scale changes that have greatly increased tenant rights from the New York State is that landlords will want to get things like certificates of occupancy so they can get rent. So yes, you're right, city service request based, but I imagine we'll be receiving a lot of service requests from property owners who want to be able to get rents.
How many, for one landlord, I heard that 8 to 10 landlords pretty much control the student housing in that C6 area. Is that?
We have a ownership in the boundaries.
I think it's definitely more than 8 to 10.
And then Oak to
But I don't
Chestnut.
know about the majority.
Here's Main Street,
Well,
Main
majority.
Street's already commercial.
Because they
And then it'd be this
bought,
North Main area here to.
through the years, they all, but
So it's
been buying it
going all the way
so,
from here.
I mean, that, according to him, it's about 8 to 10
Yeah.
Down here.
that really control.
Who said that?
I think it was Charlie Iker.
This is me.
Chestnut Street.
They may have the largest amount of holdings, but
My phone,
Yeah, I don't think that's.
And he
Whether that
Into
constitutes
Eris
control.
and Overtones.
What constitutes control?
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
like
a-
what?
Well,
It's
because
very
they,
small.
by
Like I
control
say,
means
it's
they
already
have,
That's gonna be
defined
the
with-
C6.
Yes, and it
they have the
literally
most
is
property.
already now
Okay,
functioning
they
as
control,
a,
they control.
as a
the
residential area
control
because of the high
student
the
density.
tape
Power
recorder
processing
can't
they
pick
So
up,
all we're
the
doing
ta-
is-
Danny, the tape recorder can't pick up,
Crosstalk.
the crosstalk. I imagine that you all have good points to make that everybody would like to hear. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris, and then please, Danny.
Anyway, I mean, not that that matters or anything, but it's just a point that that you brought up. And
Yeah, that's, it's highly unlikely that number's correct.
Cheeto, could you go to 410-48? It's on my page 63, but I don't know if it's different.
Are you looking at the, like, the double
The
page
modification
one?
of certain regulations. So at our meeting 2 weeks ago, the representative from the Homeless Coalition looked at this as an example of a place that other communities may have incentivized affordable housing in their zoning code.
Right.
So taking these requirements here and incentivizing affordable housing by lessening these requirements if there's or even bringing them to zero if there's for example, 15% portion of your new construction that's for, low-income housing
Right.
or whatever the actual terms may be. Is that something that you have looked into as a way to incentivize affordable housing in the city?
We have not, only because there's no, in the zoning ordinance, affordable housing isn't defined, and rent levels aren't something that's regulated in the zoning ordinance. So we haven't. I understand the concept, we incentivize other things, if you get some bonuses on some
Right.
of these bulk requirements, if you have a green room for, or whatever the case may be, or if it's a landmark, but.
It sounds like to me, the key here would be to define what that may be, which is a difficult question, but it's
Right.
certainly answerable.
I mean, she,
And then you can create those incentives.
What mechanism does the city have to verify income of people living in these units? I mean, when we work with somebody like the First Ward Action Council, if they have,
I'm sure
they
they
probably
have
have a process in place.
a
but does the city
W-2
have-
form or something like that.
Okay.
Whoever requires this stuff. in order to subsidize the paycheck.
It usually
The
goes
rest-
through a nonprofit.
Well, I'm not asking like if it's possible, I'm asking like how the city would do it, if the city currently does anything like that, and how would we, by what mechanism would we do that?
The housing division monitors projects done by community housing development organizations.
The city itself doesn't collect rent.
Sure, but they monitor, and the developer would have to send reports periodically. It's not my division, but I know that they do monitor those
And
things.
Steve Carson.
And inclusionary zoning plans, which is really what you're talking about at various communities, don't generally require that the city verify occupancy income. Generally, it's a developer who comes in and says, I'm dedicating 30% of my units to sliding scale housing or LTM housing, which is usually fixed to the federal or state poverty levels. I mean, it's about 200% above that is generally what it would be. So it would be part of the developer's plan, and actually their prices per unit are generally tied to that, such that if all of a sudden, and it's usually for, sometimes it's for a period of time, sometimes it's for 10 years, sometimes it's for 15 years, sometimes it's, you know,
Depends on the
perpetuity
incentive.
dependent.
Country town's gonna be similar to that, because they're gonna have a certain amount of units set aside for
Well,
lower income.
That's specifically, it's all gonna be lower income, but you're talking
there's-
about,
but
you're talking about
something
section
like-
8.
Yeah, section
I don't know
but
if that
I would-
really answers your question.
Well, I guess I'm just
because
wondering,
pricing
like,
background.
are they gonna, would they be made to publish their, you know, the rent prices for their units or something, so that it could be verified that they were affordable? I guess I'm just wondering how the city would, or how anybody would enforce that, even if the city isn't gonna proactively go after,
I think,
you know,
I
anybody
think because
who
they have to
makes
answer
claim
to
that-
HUD.
What's that?
They have to answer, if it's affordable housing, that means that they're getting a subsidy
Yeah,
from the
and
government. So
there's already a set amount, like if anyone going through working with DSS tenants coming in or HUD, there's already a set amount through the state, you can't do
I
it.
thought there was a distinction between affordable housing and subsidized
I
housing.
wouldn't think so.
Well, of course there is.
I think there's obviously different ways of doing it. I'd be interested in seeing how other municipalities do it. I think that the point that I'm trying to make is that, I mean, my assessment, and you can either agree or disagree with it, Tito, is that there's a real lack of quality affordable housing in Binghamton, and it sounds like the zoning code is a really great place to start looking at ways of incentivizing affordable housing, and certainly eliminating all ways of decentivizing. So, you know, before voting on this again, I think that there should be a little bit more research into that proposal from the Homeless Coalition into what that may look like in other municipalities, and if that's an ineffective strategy in other cities, and if we can bring that to our own.
Councilman Taylor, we've only got one more meeting actually to vote on. And we can't sign anything out in the last meeting because that goes to the next city council.
I think
So
sometimes
it looks like
just
this,
giving them
the way
something to
this is
build
going,
on.
it's gonna go back into the next city council.
I think that was gonna happen anyway.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to.
Yeah, I think that we need to set the right tone for the next city
Sure.
council. I mean, 3 of
I
the council
understand.
members are here right now.
Getting it right is,
Yeah.
it takes time.
Oh, it's gonna take time to do it.
Yeah. Does the
Just
Brooklyn Safe
before-
Housing Task Force have any recommendations, like policy recommendations?
Yeah,
for achieving that kind of a.
Yeah, I worked
affordable
with the RAC on as a member of the Safe Housing Task Force. We made a number of recommendations, one of which wasn't specific to particularly this ledge, but one was about inclusionary zoning and potentially conditioning pilots and various other things.
You can't
But-
I would not ever want to see developer forced to do it.
So-
When someone's investing their money, they should be able to invest it how they see fit.
Yeah, where munis have kind of come up against the wall here is generally council or administration gets a lot of pushback from developers saying, you know, we're not participating in this system. Our tenants don't want sliding scale housing. They don't want to be living with people of different incomes. I mean, I have my own opinion on that, obviously.
I disagree.
But before we direct Tito to do some work, can I just get kind of a straw poll about whether or not you want the department to pull information on similar inclusionary zoning percentages?
I think it should be absolutely be researched as part of the discussion, definitely.
Dan?
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I think so.
Danny?
Yep.
Chris?
I'm not a fan.
Okay.
And also for the,
I mean,
code-
obviously you're not.
the
It's majority.
the recommendation that Rebecca Rathmel made for the, current civil approaches to code non-compliance, how it's likely ineffective, it all goes through the courts, which then takes forever, and it just leads to bad housing, unsafe housing, and generally non-good-looking properties. She had suggested that we go through, I'm just trying to read it.
She's talking about a municipal code violations bureau.
Yeah.
And that's like that's
That's a
much
separate
more
thing.
involved
Yeah,
process going
and
through
it-
the
yeah,
state
it would be
governor's office.
just,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I
you
mean-
have to go through the state. Our city, very luckily enough, isn't exactly faced with the same kind of court backlog that they experienced in Syracuse and some of these other places, where literally you have cases whose average time sitting on the docket is a year, which is nuts for correcting a blight issue. With that said, our office has been in communication with both courts and some of our departments about making application to the state for some of our code violations, primarily junk or inoperable vehicles and vacant properties, which occupy a lot of time on the docket and take time away. However, I am one person, I'm giving you guys the update with regards to where the city sits on the Beauty Code Violations Bureau, but my recommendation would be that obviously any strengthening of our zoning ordinance comes hand in hand with code enforcement, particularly as to this rooming house issue. But that these amendments shouldn't be considered dependent upon the city creating a code violations bureau. Should next city council want to discuss that and have us present kind of the state of play, I think that that's appropriate. I just don't think it's part and parcel of this discussion.
Yeah. Well, pretty much we just need to have something set so that the people coming in after us can at least build on it. I think it's good to have as much set as we can, but we're not gonna be able to set everything.
Sure, if we want to direct the planning department to look into
Yeah.
that as well, not as part of this discussion, because I
Yeah.
think this is comes first, but I'd be willing to, put a yes behind that. But
To look into municipal, what is it called?
It's a municipal code violations bureau.
Municipal Code Violation Bureau.
I mean, I personally don't know much about it, so
I don't know really anything about it. I mean, I heard about it at the last planning committee meeting.
It's interesting. I don't mean to take it this time. It's interesting because, for example, you have cities like Ithaca, right, that just has sweeping increases to various code violations, making them misdemeanors and having them come with things like jail time. So every city handles its problems differently, right? Like you see some cities like Syracuse who are taking an administrative fine route. You see some places like Rochester that are big on clean and liens, and you see places like Ithaca that are increasing code prosecutions for certain crimes, particularly if they impact tenant welfare. So what the city wants to do is probably a combination of all three of those things.
to bring the conversation back to this ordinance, if you could for a moment just talk about the parking requirements. It's 65 on mine, but I don't know.
I think it's 68 on the document that was sent to us.
Okay.
It's got kicked back here.
So, I understand both sides of this issue. I've surely received constituent feedback on both sides of this issue. My general nervousness as the representative for downtown Binghamton is that if you have a regulation where anybody wants to do any new construction in downtown Binghamton, and in that building there's apartments with 4 or more bedrooms, that there's on-site parking required in that situation. I think that there's no room unless you're a very, very wealthy developer building a very, very large property, there's no room for on-site parking requirements. I think that it might push out development in a lot of situations, especially smaller developers. And it might be dangerous to say there needs to be parking on site in downtown Binghamton because, you know, you do want to still incentivize development, and I think, you know, bringing it more in line with that within 800 feet of other commercial districts, and also not have to be literally right on site might make more sense, maybe.
So in the downtown, existing buildings have no parking requirement. New buildings would have to provide parking within 800 feet unless they have residential units, in which case they have to provide parking within 250 feet. If they have residential units with 4 or more bedrooms, then it has to be on site.
Which most residential buildings that would be built in downtown Binghamton are going to have some of those.
So what we're trying to do is not disincentivize the creation of 1 to 3 bedroom units, and disincentivize the creation of these high density units that do not serve a variety of end users. They're really suitable for group living, and not always for other types of users.
I think whoever would put in 4 bedrooms is looking for student housing. 1, 2, 3 bedrooms are family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be mine.
Yeah, because in order for a landlord to make any money off of student housing, you're gonna need at least 4 bedrooms. So if you make 1, 2, or 3, then you're gonna completely take off all of those landlords that want it only for student housing.
We're
So-
talking bedrooms or units?
The same thing.
Bedrooms in
Well,
each
it's-
bedrooms are
Dwelling units.
Are you talking about?
Dwelling units,
The dwelling unit could have 4 bedrooms in it.
containing dwelling units with 4 or 5 bedrooms, 4
So,
or 6 or 7.
if somebody wanted to convert an existing office building to 1 to 3 bedroom units, that does not require parking downtown. If somebody wanted to build a new apartment building with 1 to 3 bedroom units, they could find parking within 250 feet, including a public parking garage. If they're within 250 feet of a public parking garage.
So then is there?
It's only when you have those high bedroom units.
Right.
that-
So those are really good points, and I think I agree with you now. But I just want to re-emphasize my original point and get your take on it. Obviously, we want to create an environment, especially in a downtown, where we want to encourage new structures, new buildings, new development, right? Preferably with a focus on affordable housing. But what are we nervous with these parking requirements that it may be impossible or nearly impossible for somebody who's trying to build a smaller building or a smaller developer to engage in a new construction if they can't have a few units that maybe, you know, with 4 or 5 bedrooms in it? What are the economics of that? And is that something is that a possible side effect of this?
I suppose it's possible, but if you're starting from scratch, you're going to do your pro formas, you're going to make the numbers work before you get to the point where you're borrowing money or you're starting construction. So new developers will have to make their proposal work with ground floor commercial and only 1 to 3 bedrooms above if they can't provide parking on site.
You're talking about downtown specifically, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is for any R1 or R2 districts, and then also any building with 4 or more bedrooms in the city. So
yeah.
I'm talking about downtown because that's what
Right,
the impact would be
but-
for my district.
But in downtown, I don't think you have a landmass big enough to really make a difference in what, you know, you're saying as far as how many units are going to build. If you're going to build from ground up 4 bedroom or more units. I'm looking, in my head, I'm picturing downtown, I just don't see any land that's available for
It
that.
would just mean the new development would have to sprawl out from downtown. They'd have to find parcels where they could, or collections of parcels where they could achieve those parking requirements.
And, another thing I said before in the past is we have a lot of students downtown. I would like to see some more families, and maybe some professionals. That way we can have a little more diversity in who we have there.
Yep, point taken. So, and then the last thing on that for me at least is the R1 or R2 districts in our city, from a preliminary sweep that I'm sure you've done, are there any streets or neighborhoods that are R2 or R1 residential that may be, where it may be difficult to enforce mandatory on-street or on-property parking?
Where it would be difficult to enforce it. It would only apply to new houses, and so we would see, or the building department would see the plans beforehand and make sure that there was an adequate driveway. Yeah, it would only apply to new.
Right.
So.
But you can't think of a street where, you know, if somebody wanted to build a row of homes or something, that it would be.
Yeah, I'm sure there are sites that have constraints where it would be hard to.
Build what? They wanted to, a
It's
street where
hard
they
to
wanted to
answer.
develop.
It's hard to answer.
So what Conrad is asking, are there places in the R1 or R2 where if you had new construction, new development built, that would be difficult to meet the parking requirement, right? And I think it's hard because it depends on the size of the parcel, how you're using
But
it.
if you did, we said R1 or R2, so you're building a residential unit. And that comes with a 2 or 3 car garage or whatever, but I mean,
In the R1 and R2 also, for 1 and 2 family houses, stacked parking is allowed. And so you could it's easier to meet your parking requirement with just a driveway. You wouldn't have to build a parking lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions here?
I think we're beating this horse pretty good.
So what's next with the thing that we pushed over to you about, push over the affordable housing stuff?
I could do some research and send something out. I'll say that I think that that's something that can be added. There's the zoning update is much bigger than housing. There's a lot of changes that we've wanted to see for a long time that come directly from the comprehensive plan. So, obviously, personally, I'd like to see this move forward as quickly as possible with an amendment to follow for inclusionary zoning.
If there is any inclusionary zoning going on for low income, I don't want it to be defined into a certain area either. I don't want to create slums. We are trying to
Absolutely.
take people away from slums. I've worked very hard in my district to put in housing and to also get the added benefits
So
that we need.
why would you,
Well, I
why
just-
would you say it creates a slum?
When you put a lot of low income people together,
Because if you zone it, then it becomes income segregated.
yeah, it's income segregation.
Actually,
It
that
says
was one
it's
of.
inclusionary. If it's
I know.
inclusionary, it's not.
Well, I'm just saying, you know what though,
It was
a low
poorly
income
put in.
person
If
has
it's
every
only in
right to be
C6.
in your district, Conrad's district, any district. I
However,
just don't want it
if you
defined to
build,
one
if
district.
you build it in a district that has more low income housing and you have inclusionary housing there, you're more apt to bring that district up, don't you think? Because you're gonna have a whole different
I put
set.
low income housing in my district.
Having quality,
But I'm just
affordable
saying-
homes for low-income people makes neighborhoods stronger.
Yes,
Yes, that it does.
and I'm sorry, but it is good for low income people to see other people outside of their economic development outside of where they are. Like, look, I want my kids to be around professors and doctors and whatnot. You know, I am a low-income parent. I don't want my kids only around low-income people. I want them to be able to dream and say, you know what, when I grow up, I want to do that. When I grow up, I want to do that. Or, you know what, look, they own cars. You know, there's a lot of kids in my district that don't have cars. And, you know, I'm just trying to say, like, let's set a standard for our kids growing up. I don't want them to walk out the door and only see poverty.
I think it would just take the form of a bonus that would apply to any new development. If you include X number of units or a certain ratio of units that are dedicated to households that are under 50% of the median income for the area.
Yeah.
You get a bonus in parking or lot coverage or whatever the case may be. We wouldn't make it. None of the bonuses that exist are district specific. They just.
So could you look at it at a citywide
Yeah.
amendment that would look something like that?
Yes.
I'd be interested to see the research whenever you get it.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty
But what Tito is also saying as well is that holding up passage of a much needed zoning amendment that affect things like illegal rooming houses and safe housing, the stuff that we're talking about are literally illegal houses that do not have fire safety requirements, I mean, don't meet basic fire safety requirements. So what he's saying is, let's not hold that up on the basis of inclusionary zoning, because it may be a larger discussion. It may be more applicable, than there may be other areas to apply it than just, you know, these particular amendments.
And I don't.
Anybody's talking about opening
Yeah.
up.
I don't think this update has any conflict with the inclusionary zoning amendment, so we can add that on to this without, you know.
Well, do you think you could,
I can.
do you think you could do a little bit of research and see
Yes.
if you could, if it's easily amendable, maybe you could update it before our next work session and we can
Okay.
sign it up to vote?
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, let's call this meeting. Get a motion, please.
Motion to adjourn.
We're adjourned.